everyone, and welcome to another episode of 100 Words or Less, the podcast. I'm your host, Ray Harkins. Thank you very much for joining us on another beautiful week here in Southern California. It's summertime. I'm swimming, teaching the kid how to swim. So much fun stuff going on. But I'm sitting in my car currently, in my garage, because, I don't have any privacy. I don't have a place to rant and rave into a microphone without disturbing my family because they're like, what are you doing downstairs? Come on, let's calm down. But anyways, I digress. On this week's show is Kevin Bergeron. Again, why would I be a professional journalist and ask the guest how he actually pronounces his last name? But let's try it again. Kevin Bergeron from Waxwork Records. Waxwork Records is a independent soundtrack-focused record label based out of Louisiana. And I've been following this label for pretty much since the first release, which was the Reanimator soundtrack on vinyl. And I started to notice that this dude who ran the label has a history within the context of music. And so I started to pay more attention, and then I heard him do an interview where he spoke about his previous band and touring schedule, and I was like, okay, this guy, he's the real deal. We got to talk to him about this. He's not just looking at vinyl soundtracks and is like, oh yeah, let's put some out, and that's kind of it. He has a deep-rooted history within independent music, and that's what I love. I love that. So anyways, let's get some business stuff out of the way. And as you'll notice, more sponsors are coming onto the show. So if you yourself, I'm pointing at you, if you have a product or something you would like to promote, email me. Realistically, I want to pimp stuff out that I deem cool or interesting or I personally enjoy. So email the show, 100wordspodcast@gmail.com. Let's talk, because you'd be surprised. Like, podcast ads aren't super expensive. And if you want to get your message out there, you'd be shocked at how this is a very, very interesting medium, because, I'm endorsing this stuff. It's coming by me. I am pitching it to you because I feel like it's a valuable thing. Or if you just want to say hello, 100wordspodcast@gmail.com. Visit the show's website. Please sign up to the newsletter portion on the right side of the page. You'll see a box where you can type in your email address. Yeah, then you'll get a nice digest of upcoming guests, recommendations, stuff you should read, watch, listen to, all that stuff. But Kevin, it was a great conversation. I could tell that he was excited to talk about the label, but then he was also excited to talk about his past in regards to all the bands he played in. And he was definitely more of a metal-centric dude, but then his interests diverged all over the place from, punk, hardcore, metal, all that stuff. I mean, we got off on a tangent of youth to today, and I love that. Anytime anybody's able to bring up the hardcore that I personally grew up on, I'm like, oh, yes, we are bonded. So anyways, check out his record label, because he puts out great stuff. Creepshow, Phase 4, Starry Eyes. Some of the stuff is maybe a little more left of center in regards to, you're like, what's Starry Eyes? Well, go on Netflix. It's a spectacular movie, and the soundtrack is incredible. So yeah, I love what he does, and that's why I wanted to have him on the show. So in keeping up with our record label month, here is Kevin from Waxwork talking to me, and I will talk to you after the jump. So I became pretty interested in what you were doing after becoming completely obsessed with what Death Waltz was doing. Once I saw what you were doing, and then other labels like One Way Static kind of popping up, admittedly a few months after, obviously, Death Waltz and obviously Mondo had been doing a few things. To me, what made you legitimate was the fact that you pretty much came out swinging with, some pretty strong releases that captured a lot of people's attention. Was that sheer timing that worked out that well, or was it the fact that you really wanted to kind of, I guess, make a statement in order to sort of differentiate yourself from a lot of the other labels that were doing this already?
Yeah, well, I mean, I wanted Waxwork to be different from the get-go. I think anytime that, a business, comes into play and there's other people doing something similar, you always need to kind of be your own different animal, be your own thing and do your own thing. And so Waxwork from the get-go, I kind of wanted it to have this own kind of feeling this, when you see a Waxwork release or you hold one, I'm really big into the kind of the emotional aspect that goes into anything like music or movies and stuff. And this kind of feeling that you get kind of you hear a song and like you remember like where you were when you first heard that song or who you were dating or like, you know, things like that. Mm-hmm. So I mean, so I definitely from the get-go I wanted Waxwork to kind of like give off this sort of aura that no one else was kind of like giving off. And you know, like you say, like, you know, we kind of like came out swinging. I think a big reason why, because I was kind of coming down from, not coming down from, but like I was kind of coming off of like the whole like touring circuit and like being in a band. And I had I still do. It was just kind of like this steam that I was rolling on. And it was just like, you know, pushing really hard and making sure that like, Waxwork was going to be like rad, you know, be awesome. And that's something that I really like tried pushing hard for with my band because, you know, we were like always touring and always working and always doing something. So I feel as if like I kind of like took what I was doing with the band and I just implemented it with Waxwork, basically, is what I'm doing. Yeah.
Sure. So was it the first three releases, like that was strategic, like or was that just sheer timing that they all kind of worked out appropriately? Because what I'm trying to get is obviously the fact that, like you're alluding to, you see other things out there and it's really easy to look at what, you know, you were doing and just be like, oh, that's cute. Another horror soundtrack label. Great. I presume it was strategic that these first three releases were the ones you wanted to do.
Yeah. Like, yes, definitely. Like it wasn't very strategic. It was just kind of like, this is what we had. Because in the beginning, we didn't have a lot of titles. Right. You know what I mean? So like, it just turned out that like in the beginning, we had these, you know, we still, you know, we had these rad titles like, you know, Rosemary's Baby and Reanimator and Day of the Dead. So like, these were all like really big rad titles that like, I just wanted because, you know, I'm a fan of these movies. Yeah. That's just how it happened. It wasn't sort of like planned in any sort of way. It was just kind of like,
that's what worked out.
That's just what it worked out really well, I guess.
Yeah.
You know? Yeah, having like these cool titles with like George Romero on board and stuff. So we came out strong. We came out really strong. Yeah, no, and honestly, like I said, I do think that made you legitimate. Like it made you a force to be reckoned with, and like not just this, you know, because you see these. I mean, even independent labels that aren't releasing soundtracks that are just, you know, whatever, releasing metal, hardcore, punk, or whatever. It's like, you know, they put out a few good releases and then they're quiet, and you're just like, dude, you're on a roll. And so, yeah, it's good you were able to kind of capitalize on that momentum. Reflecting more on yourself. So were you born and raised in Louisiana, or where was your origin story, as it were? I was born and raised in New Orleans, Louisiana. I always get, you know, I run into like this kind of like people asking me like, so the Waxwork is like a New Orleans thing. And I'm like, no, man, like Waxwork cannot be anything more different than a New Orleans thing. Like it's just, yeah. Yeah, I'm from New Orleans. Right. Yeah. I can tell you want to answer another question about that. Yeah, I mean, I really try hard not to be like, you know, especially like say anything kind of like negative about New Orleans, but it's just, you know, this is home base right now, but I definitely have entertained the idea of moving to somewhere else. Yeah. Yeah. So, but yeah, born and raised in New Orleans, for better or worse. I'm from the South. And so what was your family structure like growing up? Like mom and dad, brothers and sisters, and what were your parents kind of doing for work as you were being raised? Well, my mom, she was born in Havana, Cuba. My mom's Cuban, and she escaped from the revolution in 1960. She came to America. She didn't really start like having like a jobby job until we were kids, like when I was like starting kindergarten. Mm-hmm. So, you know, she got a job, and like my dad was a photographer, a professional photographer. He did like a lot of like commercial photography for like, you know, Barks Root Beer and, you know, like Toys R Us and stuff like that. So he was taking like photos for like the ads for like, you know, like Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles and stuff. I was able to like see all these toys before like they were actually like, you know, in the stores and stuff, because he was taking the photos for the commercials. That's incredible. Which was really cool. Yeah, it was rad. So like, you know, I would find all these toys and I'm like, oh, I want them, you know, but I couldn't open them up because, you know, like he had to take photos of them, like professional photos. But so that was cool. So yeah, and I have a brother as well, but like, you know, he's totally like not into anything that I'm into at all, like the punk scene and like any of that. He's very straight, you know. Was older or younger? He's older. Yeah, he's like 4 years older. Okay. So, yeah. It's funny you didn't have that sort of that gatekeeper experience, because usually an older sibling being kind of the person that starts to, you know, tell you what the cool records are and tell you where the cool things are. But it sounds like you didn't have that experience. No, I had to like rely on like going to gigs and like meeting people and like making friends,
And so would you typify your experience of because New Orleans definitely, like you said, it evokes so many feelings. I mean, I know, probably speaking from our kind of what I'm assuming shared experience of, New Orleans, where it's like you look at the metal scene from, I Hate God to, right. Pantera, everything that kind of revolves around that, stoner sludge stuff.
I'm so far removed from that because I mean, I don't claim straight edge, but I am, I don't drink. I don't do anything.
Right.
So like living in New Orleans, it's kind of like this, it's a party town. Like, there's a whole lot of like human wreckage here. And it's just, you have to like, if you're not gonna, I don't even think about drinking. I don't even think about fucking, doing drugs or anything. It's just not something that I ever got into. So like, I guess like to put a label on it, I am straight edge.
Yeah.
And living in New Orleans and being straight edge for like, your entire fucking life. It's a weird thing, like you just kind of like, you would expect to kind of get like bullied anywhere, but in New Orleans, it's like a different level. Like you're just kind of like, you were like so fucking alien to anybody here because you don't drink or you just won't have a beer with somebody or
right.
You won't drink a line of Coke in the fucking bathroom at like a fucking like a hardcore show or some shit. So.
Right. Well, it's very funny. You and I have similar experiences because I was born and raised in Las Vegas, and I myself, I'm 34 and I still identify myself as straight edge. And it's a foreign concept. I mean, it's one thing to be raised in a major metropolitan area that, there's obviously a million subcultures, but then to be centered around, like, I don't think there is another culture beyond Las Vegas or New Orleans that is so centered around drinking and partying. So I feel
that's all. I mean, you can't walk 10 feet without running into a bar. So that's just how it is here. So like,
So that obviously that colored your experience. Was there a specific reason that you, I guess, weren't attracted to that? Or was that just by kind of default who you were?
Subconsciously, I was kind of like noticing everything that was going on, and like I didn't associate with it, or I couldn't relate to everyone else. I was seeing like a lot of people like, I know people that have actually like they were drunk and they were driving, they fucking killed people. So I think, and I didn't look at that experience and say like, well, damn, like, I don't want to do that. It's terrible. Like, I can acknowledge that it's terrible, but I think when you're born in a place like New Orleans and you don't fall victim to kind of like that human wreckage of, everything is just like, it's just centered around partying and like kind of getting fucked up and getting shit faced. I don't know, man. It's just, I wanted to distance myself. I wanted to like be punker, I guess. And like, just be totally alien to these people. And like, at some point, you don't even think about it. You're just like, I don't even want to drink. It doesn't even occur to me.
Right. Yeah.
It's like, I don't like playing, football. I don't like fucking, I don't like doing certain things. It's just, it doesn't occur to me to even do it. And it's been that way for a long time. So I guess I was like, oh shit, I guess I am straight edge,
Yeah. No, well, that's it. I can understand the zigging when everyone else is zagging, especially in the context of music scenes in general, where it's like, if you start to see a common practice from everybody else, you're just like, yo, I don't want to do that.
Yeah. And I'm really into like energetic, like fast music, and like there is a really like beautiful culture and like a really cool thing about New Orleans. Like, it's everything is old and everything is just kind of like, there's a cool like sexiness to it. But as far as like being involved in like a DIY scene or like a punk or a metal scene here, everything is really like it's just slow and kind of like heavy and like, and I like a lot of that stuff. That's the thing. I'm really into like a lot of that stuff, but it's just, I want to fucking, before you called me, I was like fucking like blaring Youth of Today in the fucking Waxwork office. I'm just like, do stuff, get shit done.
Right. Well, it is funny because New Orleans is often, I mean, I toured for years in bands just like you. And honestly, I played New Orleans once, and like, I did maybe like 16 or 17 tours of the States. No bands stop there on a regular basis because it's notoriously difficult to draw people in that city. So like, I could see where it's like, obviously the scene has to be self-reliant, where it's like bands start up and just play to kind of one another and the other 100 people that maybe go to shows. But I could see that sort of that restlessness that you were kind of wrestling when I first asked you about the question, where it's just like, yeah, but I want to be a part of something.
Right, exactly. Yeah, and like I mean, going to gigs here, it's just like I don't really go to gigs here anymore at all because one, because I'm so busy with waxwork, and like two, it's like nothing comes through that's worth a shit to me. Uh, the stuff that I'm into kind of just passes over New Orleans because they're well aware that there's not a there's not going to be a lot of people there. It's not going to be worth their time coming all the way to the fucking like armpit of America to like play a gig to fucking 30 people
Right.
and then get ripped off. Yeah, we'll pay you, but we'll pay you in a fucking 8-ball or something,
Totally.
It's just, anyway.
Yeah, no, that's funny. So what kind of kid did you find yourself being as you started to, go through high school and start to develop some of your own interests and identities? Were you kind of the proverbial, indoor kid just sticking to his guitar, or did you attempt to play sports but realized you weren't very good at them, or how did that transpire?
I I played baseball and I was really bad at it. I played right field because like fucking like nothing gets hit into right field. And like I tried to get into it. I was finding my bearings of like what I was into and stuff. But like from a very, very young age, I was very much into like hardcore metal, just that kind of stuff, horror movies, and the cool stuff.
Right.
And yeah.
How did that stuff get introduced to you in the first place? Like I was saying, obviously you couldn't rely on your older brother. Did that just come through like the influence of friends that you were going to school with?
Yeah, like that's exactly what happened. Like I started going to, back in like the 90s, there was actually like this, there was a better scene here than there is now. And I was going to gigs, and when I was 15, I went to my first like punk rock show. And there was a band playing called Antarctica versus the World. And they opened up with a Misfits song. And I was like, holy shit. Like my favorite band, like to this day, is still the Misfits. And they opened up with Brain Eaters. And I was like, holy shit, like fucking Misfits. Like this is my tribe. These are my people, I worked my ass off to make sure that I fucking joined that band. And like less than a year later, I was the guitar player in that band. And I ended up playing guitar in that band for many years. So just by going to gigs, finding out like, from kids at school, like what's going on, finding out, oh, there's a show here tonight, come out, there's going to be a punk band. And, so that's pretty much how it happened. I mean, it was very organic, just kind of like what happened, I think most American cities. So just word of mouth, especially back then, before the internet was like so prevalent.
Right.
Just to, get a flyer at school and like just go to the show and like, hey, I'm into this, or hey, like I really don't like this shit, But yeah, like through friends, that's kind of like how I learned about this stuff, I guess.
Were your parents musical at all, or once you started to kind of bring home this really weird punk stuff, were they threatened by it?
Yeah, yes, they hated it. I mean, to this day, they still don't understand. They don't really understand like what I'm doing with waxwork. Like they just don't understand like the idea of, and that's I can't blame them. That's just how it is. Like they're old school, and they can't fathom the concept of like having a job where you don't wear stupid clothes and like go to an office. Like they think that that's to this day they're all like, why didn't you fucking go do this and become a police officer, or like go work in an office? And I'm like, oh my God, you people, like at this point in my 30s, have you not noticed that like that's never gonna happen? Like,
yeah,
it's like how much what do I have to do to show you that like this is successful, waxwork is successful, and like this is rad and this is cool, and like I've done all this cool stuff with these bands. Like they were not supportive of the music thing at all. They did not want me playing in bands. I mean, it was an issue. It was rough. It was fucking rough, man.
Right. Were there there was what were their ambitions for you? Like like you said, they're obviously they wanted you to get some sort of office, quote unquote, normal job. But was there a concept that they wanted you to do something? Did your dad want you to become a photographer or something like that?
No. I mean, I'm sure he probably would have. Well, no, he probably wouldn't have been happy with that. But it's funny. Like they wanted me to like be a fucking cop. It's weird. Like that came up a lot. Like, why don't you like go fucking try out for the force? And I'm like, what? Like, no way. Like, I fucking hate cops. Like, I will never, ever be a cop. Like, it's just, that's weird. Like, why would you want that for your kids? I mean, bless their hearts. I mean, they were good parents. They were like, they were anything that I needed, like they were there for me, and they were supportive of me in like, in many ways, but just not with like being punk, like not playing music. I mean, that was a problem, especially when I was in high school and I joined a band called the Picks. And the Picks, they were all like in college. I'm a sophomore in high school, and like these guys are in fucking college. It was, yeah, like hardcore punk. They were the fucking real deal. They moved to New Orleans from Houston, and like, fucking, like full sleeves, tattoos, mohawks. There was a chick in the band. Like, it was just like the real deal, like loud as fuck, the loudest band in town. And I went to go see them play, and like the band that I was talking about, Antarctica versus the World, we all hit it off. We became friends, started playing gigs together, and I was all like, I want to play in the Picks. Like, I want to be the fucking real deal. So I ended up joining the Picks, and that was like, that was a problem for me, like with my family. Like I didn't have a lot of friends in high school. All of my friends were in college when I was like 16, and I was playing gigs with them at bars and stuff, and like in clubs and stuff like that. They thought I was out of my mind. Like, it was just like I was a lost cause. But to counteract that, the Picks were like probably the most positive thing that could have happened to me, like to this day. Like, because Jim, who, he's my best fucking friend, and Jim actually works at Waxwork now. We hired him a month ago. He actually moved from northern Louisiana back down to New Orleans to work for Waxwork. Jim was also, or he still is, he's straight edge. And he exposed me to this kind of like this positive lifestyle that like I don't know where I would have been without the Picks. Probably fucking doing bad shit.
Right.
Like fucking, I really don't know. I mean, like I was, I probably I would have fallen victim to the fucking New Orleans curse, like the human wreckage here, that getting fucked up and like, knocking some girl up or like getting arrested or something.
Yeah.
I'm painting like this kind of dark picture about New Orleans. It's not all like that, but when the Picks came to town and I joined the Picks, like it was just kind of like, hey, look, Minor Threat, Dag Nasty, all the like the DC hardcore scene, like this fucking like get into this stuff, Kevin. Like, and they would like, make me CDs or let me borrow their records. And it was awesome, like, hey, like you guys are straight edge and you guys are fucking into like getting shit done and like doing, screen printing shirts instead of fucking, like kicking back beers and shit like that. You know what I mean?
Yeah. Oh no, absolutely. I mean, I identify with that wholeheartedly. And honestly, that that was one of the things that, like, in hearing you allude in either other interviews or other pieces of, content that you've put out there, where I've just like, I felt like there was something underneath that. And that's obviously what prompted me to speak to you. But it sounds so cool that obviously to speak to what you're talking about in regards to, the dark picture that you are portraying of New Orleans. Well, that is the reality of a lot of it. Like, it's definitely a burnout culture in the same way that, I'll obviously compare it to Las Vegas, where I've had that same picture painted, but I still have a fondness for that, even though I don't live there anymore. Your perspective is colored by that. And there's no way that you can take that away, because you have such a history with the city. So it's not like...
Exactly. Like my family's from here, and like whenever I leave, I have to do a lot of traveling because of Waxwork. So whenever I go to like, LA, or I go have a meeting with somebody in New York or whatever, like while I'm here in New Orleans working, I'm kind of like, I'm on edge about like certain things. But then like when I leave New Orleans for a little while, I'm like, man, like all these things about New Orleans are so much cooler than the rest of the country. It's kind of like this own different planet. And it's like, it's got like a lot of cool things going for it that like a lot of other places don't have going for it. So yeah, I mean, like, it's just like anything. There's a love-hate relationship with New Orleans.
Yeah, no, for sure. So it sounds like the conflict at home was always prevalent, and you, I presume, because once you started to play in bands and that pretty much consumed your life, did you have any plans of like, all right, well, I'm going to, this is what I'm going to do for college, or this is what I'm going to do from a practical standpoint? Or was it basically just like, yo, I want to tour, I want to create music, I'm just going to do this however that may be?
Yeah. I really just wanted to tour, and I wanted to make music, and I wanted to make records, and like be a rock star, basically. Like I acknowledge to this day, I mean, I still do, like, that education is like probably the most important thing for anyone. Like, going to school, like that is probably like the most important thing that any fucking body can do, is like get a fucking education. Like, don't be a fucking retard. I didn't finish college. I dropped out of college because I wanted to go on tour. I'm only like, I have like 2 more semesters and I'll finish, but like, I quit and I fucking like just hit the road, and I ended up like playing all these shows. And, like we toured Cuba and we did all this crazy shit. And I can always go back, but then like I started Waxwork, and now Waxwork takes up all of my time. So
that was the path. And
that was the path,
right? It seems to me too that the your sort of drive and the idea that you always kind of, you know, it sounds like you obviously looked at something and you're like, hey, I would like that. I'd like to achieve that in some capacity. And you kind of put your head down and do the work and get it done in a similar fashion, obviously, what you're doing with Waxwork. Were you kind of like because every band needs to have their sort of like business guy, for lack of a better term, or the band dad. Did you try to fill that role in most of the bands that you played in, whether or not it was either thrust on you or you just happened to have those qualities that were needed at the time?
Not so much in my older bands, like, but definitely like in the last band that I was in, I was kind of like, well, I mean, like you could ask them, like they'll say that like I was the dictator, but I think that, you know, any business or any sort of like enterprise needs to have some sort of like leadership. And that's the role that I took in my last band. And yeah, for better or worse, like I did everything, like from the business end of things to writing the songs to paying for studio time, pressing records, making merch, and just doing everything, literally everything. And those guys were just kind of like, you know, NOLA curse, dude. New Orleans curse.
Sure. Well, I think there is something to be said. Like every band needs to have a component. Otherwise, it's like, you know, you have 4 or 5 people sitting in a room and, you know, the music never gets out to the world because they can't, you know, organize themselves to record or whatever. But it falls apart. And obviously it sounds like what happened with you, where it's like, if you feel like one person is kind of, you know, running up the mountain by themselves without anybody else supporting it, not saying that that's what you said about your old bandmates, but it's like, that's when it kind of tends to fall apart, when you don't have everybody, you know, kind of pitching their weight in some capacity.
Yeah. And like, that's something that like I really think about Waxwork, is because like, you know, even though we're a smaller company, everyone here like pulls their weight, and you know, we all have like this kind of like this idea of what we want, and you know, we have meetings and like we make shit happen. Like it's a very positive experience.
Yeah, that's great. It's I really like how you continue to use the word positive, because it is I think there's a weird duality in the sort of dark stuff that we start to get into when we're, you know, younger, and then obviously how it stays with people like you and I, because, you know, usually you look at weird horror stuff and you're just like, oh yeah, you must be, you know, a Satan worshiper, and you hardly, you know, can wrap your head around doing anything else in the real world. But then like clearly that's not the case. And so like, do you find that people get thrown off by either you being nice or being positive, or any sort of those interactions that you have?
People are really thrown off when they meet me, because they feel as if like when they speak to me on the phone or like through email that I'm going to be like this businessman. But like, then when they meet me, they see that like, I'm totally like not that. Like I'm totally like the opposite of like a businessman. But as far as like, I've never ran into any like sort of like trouble with anyone thinking that like, you know, I was like some sort of like crazy like devil worshiper or something like that because I was in the horror. I think that's like kind of stuff that's high school shit.
Yeah,
that's stuff when you're younger and stuff like that. Yeah, when I was younger. Yeah. Anyway.
Yeah. No. Yeah. No, I understand what you're saying. But I find it also incredibly attractive. Like, I had Spencer from Death Waltz on my show, maybe 2 years or so ago. And then I found a real kinship with him as well, because obviously he comes from, you know, the DIY punk and hardcore scene. And obviously it seems like there's an undercurrent in a lot of the stuff that exists that I feel that has that sort of quality where it's like, oh yeah, I know how to like put out a record on my own because I did it for, like in your example, like you did it for your own band, and kind of having that, that knowledge to be able to put it forward. Do you run across people that have a similar experience, whether or not it's like consumers of your product or other people that you've kind of met that travel in the sort of soundtrack world that do have that background, or is that just kind of more of a minority and I'm reading too much into it?
No, not like, not at all. Like fucking, you know, I'm able to like see, you know, who follows us on like Instagram and Twitter, and like, you know, like I speak to a lot of customers personally. And something that I've noticed is that like a huge number of our customers are actually like, they're into that lifestyle. Like they're into like, the punk DIY movement. And, there's a lot of them that are like straight edge, and a lot of them that like, they own their own companies, but, they're doing it at a very like grassroots DIY level, like kind of like, they own a tattoo shop, or like they fucking, they have a record label themselves, or they have a comic book store or something, like just like cool stuff, like really cool, fun stuff, So yeah, I run into a lot of like people that have very similar interests. And I think it's refreshing when you meet somebody that has absolutely nothing to do with like, with the punk thing. Like, and they, you mentioned Minor Threat, and they're like, who? Like, what are you talking about? Black Flag, what?
Right.
Like, it's very refreshing. And then like, you connect with people that, I think that's all about connecting with people, like no matter fucking where they come from in life, like I think putting up these walls, or like where, you only associate with a certain breed of people, is like kind of like, it's like the worst thing ever. It's like the worst thing that you could ever do. It's like, that's something that I love about Waxwork, is that like, we try to connect with everybody. I think like, I follow a lot of other like record labels too, soundtrack labels and otherwise, like they could be anything. People that reissue like, soul records from the 50s, 60s. There's not a whole lot of communication with the customers. I mean, there's some, but like I try to, as much as possible, like connect with the customers on some sort of personal level. Just because I think it's cool, like that would make me happy if like I reached out to somebody about something, and like they hit me back with like, hey, call me, dude, like fucking call me. I'll get that taken care of. Here's my number,
No, I think it's a really important point, because I think it's one of those things. It's very, it's very easy to mythologize things that you get into, even if they are small. It is easy to like, not even so much put something up on a pedestal, but to look at something and be like, oh, wow, like that's so cool. I could never achieve that. But then like you, I'm sure would immediately tear that idea down. It's like, no, dude, like don't think that I'm cool by what I've done. It's like, you can do something just as easy. And I think that's kind of where the sort of DIY culture is. It's not about it, like you said, it's not about putting up walls, but it's just about giving you that sort of like undercurrent of experience, where it's like you can meet a person and immediately be connected to them, but then also meet a person, like you said, who had no idea what punk or hardcore was, but then be able to be like, oh, like you can start that too. You 55-year-old guy, if you're super into, 1920s silent movies, like how about you do a soundtrack label based around that or whatever?
Exactly. Yeah. Like, was it like the Big Boys? The band, the Big Boys from Texas, and they were all like, now go start your own fucking band or whatever. Like, I think that's like something that they would say, like, they would say that like after each gig or something, or that was like a song. I don't remember exactly. Yeah. But it was like, now go start your own fucking band.
No, totally. So it seems like the last band you were in, remind me of the name again.
She's Still Dead.
That's right. It seems like that the one that, I guess, for lack of a better term, had the kind of most momentum, and you poured the most of, I guess, yourself into that, from just either trying to be successful or songwriting and that sort of stuff.
Yeah. She's Still Dead was like the most recent band, and that's the one that like that's the one that I think was like the most serious in terms of like the amount of work and effort that I put into it, and I was like kind of like the band leader, and yeah. That's the most recent one. Right.
And you played guitar in that, correct?
Yeah, guitar and backup vocals.
Okay. What were you what sonically, you don't even have to reflect on this band, but because it sounded like you were doing something kind of different with all the bands that you were aligning yourself with, but what kind of walk me through what you were sonically trying to achieve? Like, what bands were you kind of looking up to where it's like, oh man, that would be rad if we could do something that sounded somewhat like that?
It wasn't any one thing. It was kind of like all over the map, because at that time I was like really listening to like a lot of like classic thrash metal. And, but I was like taking that, and I was trying to like take that thrash metal blueprint and apply it to like hard, like punk, like kind of like punk rock. Those two things, like those two genres kind of like go hand in hand. It's like they're both fast, and like they both like, like they share members of bands and stuff like that. So it wasn't like I was trying to sound exactly like, not exactly, but it was all over the map, really. It was kind of like I was listening to a whole lot of shit at that time that now I don't even listen to anymore. And if it were to come on, I'd be all like, oh God, I don't want to listen to this shit, where I was at that moment in my life, I guess.
Yeah. How long did that band exist?
From 2010 until early 2013, I want to say.
Got it.
Yeah.
And so it sounds like you had obviously some sort of touring experience. Did you like the concept of touring, and did you like it when it was actually put into practice?
Yeah. I love touring. Like that's, I joke around all the time with like, my friend Jim that, we played in the Picks together. Like we joke around about just like living on tour, like just hitting the road and like, just like, that's what we do forever. That's something that we would always talk about. But obviously that's not, unless you're Black Flag, like that's not going to happen.
Yeah.
Living on the road, like it's it's hard. Touring is hard. I mean, you've been in bands. But I really love the experience of touring and like seeing new places and like playing in a different place every night. Like that's so cool to me.
Obviously now since you own a business and that it consumes basically all of your life, is it one of those things that there are times where you get a little wistful for being on the road, or do you like being able to obviously be in one place and kind of, focus on the task at hand, so to speak?
I think Waxwork is like at a point now where I think, if I wanted to like go back on tour, like, start a new band or like join another band and go back on tour, I could totally do that. And like Waxwork would be fine. Like, I do kind of like stress out over making sure that everything runs as like a tight ship here at Waxwork. So like, but at this point, I think that, even though we're incredibly busy, like, every day at Waxwork is kind of like this, like, I get fucked with by Susie. She says that like the only time that I'm not working is when I'm sleeping. But even then I'm probably like in my head, like thinking about work. Like I fantasize about like going on tour again and like, touring like Europe and places that like, certain places that I've never been.
Right.
I get approached all the time by people like, hey, you want to play in a band, blah, blah, blah. But then like, then I think about Waxwork and I'm like, I'd rather do this right now. Like make records, like do cool shit, like, sell records that people are into,
Was there anything that kind of took you by surprise in regards to the conceit of starting a label and kind of like letting it run? Because like usually I'll give you an example where it's like usually no one when they start their own thing is like, dude, I can't wait to be a boss. Like it's going to be so cool to like supervise people and like tell them what to do. Was there any sort of like things that surprised you as the label either started to grow or the inception of it from just like the sheer workload, or any other example that you can kind of point to?
Not really. I mean, like I like the idea. I think I was thinking about this morning. Like I think the punkest thing that you can do like right now, like in 2015, is be a boss and like own your own business. And like whether that be like a construction business where you're like swinging a hammer, or a record label owner, or like somebody that like runs a restaurant, I think that is way more appealing than working for somebody else. I think that's like, it's punk as fuck to be like a business owner or a homeowner, or like just to be in a position where like you don't have to answer to somebody else. Like that's what, that's being true punk. Like, I don't fucking answer to anybody. Like I'm my own boss. I am my own master, that whole thing. Mm-hmm. So I really dig the idea of like, I wasn't like, obviously I wasn't looking forward to being like a boss man. I don't even think of it like, oh yeah, I'm a boss, because I'm not. Like everything here at Waxwork is like, it's very like communal, but like, I mean, I think that it's not a negative thing to be a boss or a business owner or anything like that.
Mm-hmm. No, I see your point. I guess what I was trying to illustrate was the fact that there are a lot of people have the notion to like start a label or do something like that. But then obviously once the rubber hits the road and like the practical applications of it start to peel away at that dream or whatever. So what things, like as you started to, climb the proverbial mountain, what things were thrown back at you that was like, oh, I didn't expect that thing to happen, or I didn't expect, this massive tax bill to come through or whatever.
Yeah, definitely like taxes and shit like that. I don't know, like that's a hard question to answer because like it's daily. Like we're something like we get hit with something and I'm like, fuck, I was not expecting that to happen, or I wasn't expecting like that to cost that much money, or it's a daily thing, just getting to work, man. Like everything, like just trying to run something that's successful. You're fucking jumping over landmines left and right. So like, yeah,
there's no easy answer.
There's no easy answer to that question. Yeah.
Yeah. No, I I understand. I understand what you're saying. It's definitely, especially just because, this can lead into another question where, usually you have kind of that point in your own head, whether it's like obviously in the bands that you played with previously, where it's like, oh, wow, like this thing that I'm doing feels like real, whether or not it's like, oh, we played a big show or, we got to play with another cool band or whatever. When in Waxwork's kind of, infancy, or even whatever, the first year or two, when did you feel that, I guess, for lack of a better term, it became, real, where it's like, oh, wow, this is like a quantifiable commodity?
After we launched pre-orders for our first release, Reanimator, definitely. There was a whole lot of fear going into it. I was just like, holy shit, I really hope that people are going to be into this. Because I knew that there were other labels doing it, and like I suppose that they were successful. I don't know. But like I wanted to do it because I thought it was like really rad. And like I was saying earlier, that I wanted to kind of like do it like with a different style than what other people were doing. But it was when we launched pre-orders for Reanimator that I was like, oh, look, like we can totally do this. And like, it seems like people are catching on, like in the beginning, we obviously didn't have that many fans in the beginning. Like, just by like putting the work in and like really pushing forward, I think we've grown exponentially. Like, I think, I was using the term last year a lot, like we've outgrown our shoes, because the label kind of like blew up, especially after like our second release, which was Rosemary's Baby. But yeah, definitely, like from the beginning, I was like, "Oh shit! Like this is legit. We can do this."
Right? You're like, "Hey, this pre-order sold more copies than like my band's last full length did in like a few hours."
Yeah, like within like a minute, because my old bands didn't sell a lot of records.
Right. No, it is funny when you're able to stack two things up against one another and be like, "Oh, so this is what quote unquote success is." Like I thought I was doing something cool back then, but wow, this is cool.
Yeah. Well, I think it depends on like what your definition of success is, but yeah, you're right. You're definitely right. Like, like I think just putting out a record in general, even if nobody buys it, even if like you only sell it to like your friends, like I think that in and of itself is like, it's a success. Like that's what I think Ian Mackay was saying. I was like reading this interview with Ian Mackay from My Threat, Fugazi. And he's all like, every little thing that you do, whether it be like playing a gig to like 3 people and a dog, is a success. It's totally like you fucking did that. You played that gig, you booked it, you played it. That's a successful experience. Whether or not like people were into it, fuck it. You made some records. That was a success.
Totally. No, I think it speaks to a really important point of you never know where the influence is going to come from. You never know what your one, crappy demo tape is going to do to change the trajectory of someone else's life because they identified with it in some capacity. It's like that is like an immeasurable effect of putting stuff out into the world for criticism, good or bad. I think it's a really important point. It doesn't matter from a monetary standpoint if it's successful. It's like, well, yeah, I mean, if it was, then obviously people like you and I wouldn't dedicate our lives to weird shit like we're doing. But the impact of just being able to influence is so great, and that's obviously what you're pouring into Waxwork as well, where it's like, oh yeah, I'll usher this along, and like you said, speak to that sort of aesthetic and vibe.
Right. Exactly.
So like you mentioned previously in other interviews, and you've done interviews with Susie, she's your girlfriend, correct?
Yes.
Obviously working with a significant other that brings a whole lot of questions and a whole lot of concerns that sometimes spring up in regards to, division of labor, and then like whether or not they wanted to do this in the first place and all this other stuff. I know she still dedicates a lot of her time to her own day job as well. Was that your original idea to be like, hey, yes, I'd love for you to help me with this? Or was this just sheer, like she saw you struggling to keep things up, and then she's like, oh, I can help you?
I think both, definitely. Like, I think we went into it kind of like together. I feel as if like Waxwork kind of like took over. It like, it started out like in her photo studio. So, but then like as it grew, it just kind of like just spread and like took over like every fucking inch of the photo studio. There were like records stacked to the ceiling. So like, but she was, it was always like, it was agreed upon from the beginning that, she was going to be equally as important to the label as anybody else. Like, and she has like any chance that I can get where I can like say that she does so much for the label, I'll take it, because like she does a lot more for the label than like I think I could ever do. honestly. Like there's things that like I can't even like wrap my brain around it because I'm not as smart, I guess. But like there's just a lot that she does for the label that is it makes it what it is, you know. Like when you see like a Waxwork product, like it's definitely like it's a creation by myself and from Susie as well, but heavily on the Susie side.
Sure.
So yeah, I mean, yeah, but like she definitely like puts a lot of like work into it, and like it's cool. It's cool being able to like work with your significant other.
Yeah. So yeah, the intention initially was to try to keep, you know, your stuff separate, but then that quickly had to get thrown out the window because of where you're at.
Yeah, I kind of feel bad about it, but then I don't.
Sure.
Because this is so much radder than like, you know, and everything, isn't it? You know, like fucking making records. Isn't that the coolest thing ever? I don't know.
Yeah. Well, no, it is. It is. Yeah. It is. It's meaningful to a very select few, and those select few we cherish greatly.
Yes. Yeah. And like, we both dig doing this. It's like really rad. It's, yeah, it's cool being able to do it together. It's awesome.
Well, one last thing I want to hit on before I let you go was the, you know, we kind of alluded to it earlier, but just the common conception that people have of record labels, no matter how large or small, is that, you know, like what I'll use a random example of, you know, someone ordering something from your guys' store and then gets mad because it hasn't shipped 12 hours later. And it's like, well, dude, you placed the order at 10 at night. Like, hold on. Like we're just waking up or whatever. We're not Amazon. We're not shipping 24 hours a day. What are the things that I guess your general consumer, not even maybe specifically related to, you know, your label, but that you just notice that get kind of pushed back on you guys, where it's like, oh yeah, like how come you guys didn't do this or that, or that sort of just like, you guys don't know how this really works at all in any capacity.
We get a lot of that kind of stuff. I mean, like we get a lot of it's okay. It's not like, you know, the end of the world. Like usually like when we have any sort of like complaint, like we address it. We try to address it like very quickly. And then like, you know, that person with the complaint will come back to us and be like, wow, thanks a lot. Like really, like, I appreciate you like explaining to me, you know, why my record hasn't shipped yet, or why like my record arrived damaged or something like that. Like, it's just, I think a lot of times when something goes wrong with any sort of business, like they immediately, well, especially with Waxwork, they immediately assume that like Waxwork was the cause of that like broken record or something like that. Not everyone feels that way, but a lot of people like, we kind of like, God damn it, you know, motherfucker, Waxwork. But you know, we accommodate, I think, the customers very well, and like we try to treat everyone like fairly. So like, it's just, you know, that's like the one thing that I've noticed is that like sometimes like you just, you know, you want people to have more faith in us than like, you know, the postal service or like, or whoever, even the pressing plant sometimes, because, you know, we don't get to like, we can't exactly open up every one of these records and listen to it and make sure that there's not a skip or something, you know what I mean? But like if that is the case, like we go out of our way to like make sure that like the customer is happy, you know, we try to fix it.
And now, obviously, since soundtracks and putting them out has reached, you know, I mean, I would argue beyond a tipping point where it's like clearly you see a lot of stuff that's being put out there that, you know, is questionable as far as like how many people are actually interested in that. Does that concern you? Is it one of those things where you're just like, oh man, like, can we just knock it off? Because like we kind of got a good thing going, and I don't want this whole scene, I guess, being pushed away because of, you know, just everybody else kind of jumping onto the same ship.
No, I think like it's you know, I think it's going to be around for a while. Like the vinyl like soundtrack thing, it'll be around for a while. I don't think it's going to go anywhere anytime soon. You know, especially because like, you know, I'm actually like I'm looking at like our release schedule right now, and like we have like it's totally like worth everyone's time. It's like really cool shit that like I think people are going to dig it. I think people are really going to like it. Like yeah, I think it's going to be around for a while. I don't think it's going anywhere. I'm not worried about it. And if it, you know, whatever, we'll do something else.
Well, no,
it's
yeah.
kind of like how I live my life. Yeah.
Right. No. And I was more so reflecting on the fact of the not so much from kind of the first responders on the scene, which is, I would lump your label into that with, you guys, Death Waltz, and obviously Mondo once they started to, release more records on a regular basis. But then obviously it's like you start to see smaller labels, kind of erode, the consumer base to where it's like they have to, as a consumer, you have to make a decision where it's just like, all right, if there's 15 releases available because there's so many now, it's like I have to kind of pick and choose, that's because clearly, like you said, you guys have obviously you have a good head of steam going, so it's moving towards that. So it was more so of a general commentary to see if you had thoughts specifically on that, not so much on your release schedule, because I trust you.
Yeah, I think like, especially for like the new labels popping up too, like, that's cool. That's great. But like, I think a lot of times, like, people that want to start a new, especially like right now, like in 2015, like all of a sudden say like, hey, I want to start a new label. Like that's going to release film scores and soundtracks on vinyl. Like, I think immediately those labels will be faced with the kind of like, well, first off, you're going to see just how difficult it is. It's fucking hard. And then also like what's available, because you have like these kind of like these powerhouses like Mondo, Death Waltz, and then you have Waxwork and One Way Static, and like labels that like kind of like, I don't want to say have scooped up like a lot of good shit, but like if you look at our discography, we have like a lot of really cool shit. And I think each one of I know a lot of like the stuff that's coming out of Mondo, Death Waltz that like a lot of people don't know about, and it's fucking really radical stuff, like awesome stuff. So I don't know. I mean, like, it's just, if I were in the position, like right now in 2015, and I didn't have a record label, I wouldn't start a record label that released soundtracks. I would try to do something else.
Right.
That's not me saying like, hey guys, don't start a fucking record label. Like, do what you want. But it is very difficult, even for, I think, for labels like Waxwork and Mondo, Death Waltz. It's a full-time job, and like this, anyway. Yeah. No.
Well, I mean, you just get to a point where it's diminishing returns, where it's like,
right.
Does every, C- D+ movie in the cult horror bins, does that really need a deluxe reissue with, crazy colored vinyl that, 150 people are going to be interested in? It's like, that's when you start to, you have to worry about the culture being able to support itself.
I guess you could say that about Chud and Tourist Trap, which were like two movies that we're releasing.
Sure.
I want that. I want those two titles on vinyl. Hell yeah. Like fucking right. Like that's what I like about Waxwork is the fact that like we can release something like we don't have any one sort of like genre or sort of like kind of like, we release only like these A+ movies. Like I like being able to say, hey, you were releasing Tourist Trap and then like next month release Nosferatu or like, release The Warriors or something like that. Yeah. It's cool. Like, I like being all over the place. I don't ever want to be like just doing one thing. That's
right. You can, that's not, you can release highbrow art and lowbrow art in just the same fashion as long as it passes your criteria of it being awesome.
Yeah, definitely.
No, that's really exciting. Well, Kevin, I really appreciate you hanging out, and I hope this interview is slightly different than me trying to get your release schedule for the next 3 years up out of you.
No, man, I really dug this interview. Like, it's very different than what I've been accustomed to with like talking about soundtracks nonstop. Right. So it's really, really refreshing. Thanks a lot, man.
So there you have it. There was Kevin. There is the record label history, and it's a nice little family operation he runs down there. Pretty cool, right? That's what all of us kind of want to do, have our own little corner of the world and kind of do what we love and make a living out of it. That's it. That's the goal. You look at people who have this sort of soul-crushing ambition, and I put it like that very specifically, where they feel like they need to take over the world. I've never understood that. I have ambitions, and I have various goals that I want to achieve, but is it one of those things where I'm so cool and busy that I don't even have the time to recognize a sunrise? As cliched as that sounds. So I just look at what Kevin does and I'm like, that's great, man. Keep doing what you're doing. Hopefully it lasts for a very long time and you ride off into the sunset with 70 some odd soundtrack releases to show for it. So anyways, Tom Ridgefield, as always, is the producer for the show. We are closing out the record label month with a very special guest next week, a person who I've been wanting to talk to for quite some time on the show. And then we'll continue back to our regularly scheduled / interesting people, something like that. Thank you very much for listening. I have been Ray Harkins. You have been the listener. This has been 100 Words or Less, the podcast. And until next week, please be safe, everybody.